Moin moin and welcome to another Trabant video. This time we got quite a big project on our hands. The front axle bushings have to be renewed and I decided to paint the axle pieces and all the miscellaneous parts. For that we start unscrewing the main axle nut. The right side did loose quite easy. On the other side, as you can see, I couldn't loosen the nut even by jumping on it. So I got out the propane torch and heated the outside to loosen the part a bit. Then it was time for jumping on it again. And there goes the nut. After that you can loosen the wheel nut. Then you can jack up the car and remove the bolts. And off comes the wheel. Now there is just a small flathead screw holding the brake drum on, and it slides right off. The brake pads were still looking quite good. We continue by taking out more screws. Here you can use a wrench as a lever or just softly tap on the screws like this. The lower suspension bolt nut can be loosened on the car or when you have it on the bench. As you can see, I should have chosen the second option because I hurt my pinky quite bad doing this. Ouch. Then loosen the steering arm nut. Ratchets really make your life easier, don't they? Of course, you also have to remove the securing pin before unscrewing the bolt. As you can see, the joint doesn't come loose as soon as we remove the nuts. We need a special tool to remove them and push them out. I didn't catch it on video, but I also had to heat the other side.
And wait for it. Bam.
And now it's loose. Second to last thing is the brake line. Make sure you have some sort of container to catch the brake fluid, because it's really toxic to the environment.
Brake line is off. There were no drips.
Then remove the securing pin and take off the suspension fork from the flat leaf spring.
Maybe we have to replace that thing too, Laura.
Sadly, the upper bushing was squashed by the previous owner.
Yeah, that should not look like this.
When you disassemble the brakes, you have to take those small screw holders off. Just push them down and twist them a bit. Then we can take some pliers and carefully remove the springs on one side, so we can wedge the brake shoes out. Then remove the outer adjusters and put them away carefully, like all the inside parts of the brake. Knock loose the screws from the brake cylinder . Hit them with the wood and the hammer so they pop off.
Careful.
I was barely able to get the fork out. Carefully hammer out the upper bushings. Then you can push in the new bushings and hammer them in, protected by the wood. To make the reaming process easier, you should put in the lower bushing 45 degrees set off, and then also just hammer it in carefully from below. Then we take the suspension fork from a new and painted parts. As you can see, we have to ream the bushing quite a bit to make it fit. For that, you insert the reaming tool and first start off slowly, removing material so you don't enlarge the hole too big. It just barely has to fit in. You need a lot of patience and to get the right feel for the reaming tool. As you can see, it fits in perfectly. Now just add the seal. And there we go. Now we have to add just enough distance washers so the part still rotates but does not have any play. You can see me just adding and removing washers to make the plate fit and not rock at all. Another important thing is to put the thickest washer at the top. Tighten with 17 newton-meters. The seal is riding nicely in the groove. Now we just have to add some grease. It's time for some heat again to get the securing pin from the lower suspension out. After the securing pin is removed, we can remove the lower suspension bolt. Again with some heat, so the parts loosen up some more. And there it goes.
Woo!
For the new lower suspension bolt to fit right, we have to file in the groove deeper. Filing, so much filing. The manual says to use the old bolt as reference and just do it by eye. Now compare it to the old one. And more filing. We push the suspension pin in. And as you can see, there is only a small lip still. So we take the file and carefully, really carefully, carve the rest away. Then we can insert the securing pin and also push it in with the vise. Don't force it in too hard. If you feel resistance about the halfway point, you didn't file enough. So carefully push it out the other side and file again more. Like with the suspension fork, we also have to add washers here until the part still moves, but we don't have any play. When adding grease here, you can see that I didn't file the bearing surface from the lower suspension bolt flat enough. So you can see it leak out on the left side. That means I should have filed more on the right side to make it flat. The space in between here is quite small, so it's still acceptable. The seals from Trabant valve are quite a bit too small, so you have to push them on the lower suspension bushing to get them on at all. The lower suspension bolt is 50 nanometers. Now push through the securing pin and fold over the edges. Really carefully, we can now push down the seal onto the sealing surface. Here again, there are different ways to accomplish the same result. You can put the spring together on the outside and stretch it over, or you can wrap it around and then close it on the other side. Another remark on the Trabant valve parts. Those caps, you can only get them on once and not reuse them like the old ones, cause they just barely fit on. Please don't do it like me, get the appropriate pliers. I also got them afterwards. I also decided to change the real bearing. I just wanted a completely new front axle. And there it goes. Okay, we have the axle here at 133 degrees and the bearing, which we put in the freezer, minus 20 degrees. You can see the ice forming on it. Let's just put it in.
That's it! It's in!
Now we can clean off the rust and paint the pieces. For that, you have to shake up the paint real good. I painted on 2 layers of base coat and 2 layers of top coat. Then install the inner adjusters again and secure the bearing with the spring ring. It is important to install the brake cylinders like this. You see the schräge Fräsung am Radbremszylinder. It pushes the brake shoes more against the drum. It assists you with braking a lot. Now the bolts for the brake cylinders are 25 nanometers. The inner adjusters are important that they only move out and not in without pulling back the spring.
That's important, that they don't go back in long. Yeah.
Then we follow up by the brake line that connects the 2 cylinders. You can't really use a torque wrench on them, but just tighten them enough so you can feel the copper deforming, but not too much, or you will squish the whole thing. Then it is seal time. Put in the new seals into the brake plungers and carefully insert them into the cylinders. Also use the brake paste on the other rubber parts so they are conserved right. Then put in the brake shoes and pull them over the brake cylinders with the springs. Put in the holders again by twisting them 90 degrees. And now you can set on the brake drum. You may have to slide the brake shoes around to make it fit right. As a final step, just pre-tighten it. You tighten it fully on the car later. Now we're back on the car.
Erstmal ein bisschen.
Now we have to reconnect the brake line. The brake drum should slide on easily. You just have to push the brake shoes in the right place. There's supposed to be a washer under here, but I never had one, so I still have to order it. The seals on the ball joints were also pretty worn out, so add some grease to the ball joints and also grease the new seal. Now add the crown nut and tighten it with 15 nanometers. Also don't forget the securing pin. So we have to pump up the suspension with a jack or set down the car on its wheels. I used a combination of both. The outer nuts and the securing bolt are tightened to 45 nanometers. The inner 4 screws that connects the steering arm to the motor carrier has to be tightened to 80 nanometers. And the axle nut to 175 nanometers on the new models. And finally the wheel nuts with 68.5 nanometers. With that we are finished with the project